So one of your languages was Punjabi.
Yes, sir.
What do you think is the status of Punjabi language as per the Constitution of India?
So Punjabi is a scheduled language under the 8th schedule of the Indian Constitution.
Apart from that?
So within the Constitution, sir, I'm not aware of any other provisions.
Okay. So when we talk about Hindi as the official language, and there are some debates that Hindi should be made the national language as well. So coming from a Punjabi speaking background, what is your opinion on that matter?
So my Punjabi background means that I would not have a lot of problem in transitioning to Hindi as the official language. There's a lot of similarity of vocabulary between Hindi and Punjabi.
I'm talking about the concept of national language, not the official language.
Exactly, so. So for that, I believe my Punjabi background should not matter in my views. I believe nationally there is not a sufficient consensus to have Hindi as the official language. We have seen the backlash from the South Indian states. There are also concerns regarding cultural imperialism in the South Indian states but through imposition of Hindi. So I believe those sentiments should be respected, and Hindi should not be made the national language, by which I mean the main medium of communication between people of different states.
Okay. Your DAF form signifies that you played squash during the college time. Where did this originate?
So the game, squash?
The game, yeah.
I'm sorry, sir, I'm not aware about its origins.
All right. It originated in UK, England. So when we talk about England, and you have worked as a fellow in Rajya Sabha as well, so what is one most important feature of the Indian Constitution that we have borrowed from UK?
So the parliamentary system of government in which we have the Prime Minister and dual membership, members of legislature being also part of the executive. That is the most significant feature.
Okay, and what is the significance of bicameralism that we borrowed from UK in today's context? Do we need two houses or just one house? The House of the People is sufficient.
So Rajya Sabha plays a very important role in multiple aspects. It's a deliberative chamber. We have expert members. It's a federal chamber which has representatives from different state legislatures. It is also a cooling chamber. It's a chamber of continuity. So all of these roles and also some special provisions regarding Rajya Sabha, for example, creation of an all India service and transfer of powers to parliament to frame laws on certain state subjects. So these provisions are due to Rajya Sabha's special character as a second chamber, as a federal chamber. I believe those reasons necessitate the continuation of Rajya Sabha.
When we compare the constitutions of the world, do you think that Rajya Sabha signifies inequality in some ways?
So could you please elaborate in what sense the inequality?
The preamble says that we have to maintain equality of status and opportunity amongst all the citizens. And when we compare the constitutions, different constitutions of the world, having bicameral houses in US, UK, and India, do you think that Rajya Sabha is a symbol or maybe stands for inequality in some ways?
So compared to US and UK, I would say Rajya Sabha affirms the principles of equality. For example, in the UK, we have life peerages in their second chamber. And the US, we have equal number of seats, 2 seats to each US state, regardless of the population. So the smaller states have much higher representation in the US Senate. So in that sense, in the Rajya Sabha, seats are distributed according to population, and the memberships are not lifelong. They are accessible to each and every citizen of the country. So in that sense, we are much better than the concerned nations.
But the number of seats have not been revised since 1971. Do you think that the smaller states or the states with lower population have lagged behind in terms of their voices being represented in Rajya Sabha?
So definitely in the last 50 years, the relative population ratios have changed, and hence the distribution of seats should reflect that. But I would still not call Rajya Sabha an unrepresentative institution. The differences lie on the margin, not in the core character of the House.
Okay. So Rajya Sabha is chaired by the Honorable Vice President of India.
Yes, sir.
What would you comment upon the political linkages of the Honorable Vice President before his election and after his election as the vice president and after his retirement from the office?
Sir, would you like my analysis of the present Honorable Vice President or the in general?
Post of vice president, the constitutional post of vice president.
So the vice presidency is a constitutional office which must be free of all political linkages. Ideally, we would want some cooling off period between the person being in active politics and being elected to the highest or the second highest constitutional office of India. But that is practically found to be infeasible in the last 70 years of our experience. But the conduct of the members of the honorable vice presidents in the past has shown an independent streak in which they've sought to conduct the affairs of the House with dignity and non-partisanship.
In the monsoon session last year and in the winter session last year, there was this entire hue and cry with regards to suspension of member of parliament of the opposition parties, and there were several allegations against the honorable vice president. So what would you comment on that context?
So I agree there were allegations of bias, but in my view, the situation had become so chaotic and the decorum of the Rajya Sabha had been diminished to such an extent, despite the Honorable Vice President's pleadings since the last 2 to 3 years regarding Parliament being the temple of democracy. He has tried to encourage members of Parliament to make the most of the deliberative platform, the highest debate platform that the India has to offer. Despite that, the honorable members of Rajya Sabha engaged in some activities that are unworthy of the House, and I believe those actions were justified.
So with your experience as a Rajya Sabha fellow, what are the 3 changes that you would recommend in Rajya Sabha? 3 reforms in Rajya Sabha?
So one, as I was an intern at the fellow, so at the Rajya Sabha, so I would want a higher emphasis on research support to the honorable MPs. I believe that there's no institutionalized system that exists compared to the US, where the US Congress hires interns on a rolling basis, and there's a proper fellowship program. In India, it is still more haphazard than that. Secondly, discussion of parliamentary standing committee reports, which are not presently discussed. Many of those reports are not discussed. And thirdly, a greater coordination between the opposition and treasury benches regarding deciding the agenda of the House. So if, for example, the opposition could get 1 day every 2 weeks in deciding the agenda of the House, that would be a positive step in encouraging the opposition to make the most of its time on the floor of the House.
Right. Coming to Lok Sabha, it's been more than 3 years that the current Lok Sabha was elected. And there is this constitutional office of Deputy Speaker of Lok Sabha that is still vacant. What would you comment upon that?
So in my view, it's a very important office, the office of the Deputy Speaker. I believe it should be filled at the earliest. It appears that the parliamentary convention regarding the Deputy Speaker being from the opposition benches has caused a certain reluctance on part of the majority in Lok Sabha to appoint the Deputy Speaker. If that is the case, I would encourage that hesitancy to be removed and the elections to be conducted.
Right. You talked about the deleveraging of balance sheets of the Nifty 50 companies.
So,
however, recently in the Nifty Next 50 index, 3 loss-making companies were incorporated. Zomato, Paytm, and Nykaa. They have now been included in the Nifty Next 50 index. So, would be my last question. That with regards to the Nifty Next 50 companies, they are not profitable with having, undefined PE ratios, and yet, the share market is going up. So how would you define or, conclude that disconnect?
Sir, I agree with that. These are all startups which are 5 to 10 years old, which have high revenues, but are still, all of them are operationally loss-making companies. However, the valuations for startups are decided differently from legacy companies because of the high growth rates and very new business models whose potential is more speculative than concrete. We do not have precedents on how to value these companies. The investors are taking their bets. The VC companies did so. Now the stock market investors are doing so. I would encourage some level of caution, considering the example of Paytm that saw a reduction in its stock prices. I would advise caution to retail investors specifically to not buy into the hype of these startups coming to the stock market.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Unacademy. Let's crack it.